Pursuant to notice, I now call up House Resolution 1809, block the use of transatlantic technology in Iranian Made Drones Act. The bill was circulated in advance. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 1809, to require the development of strategies and options to prevent the export to Iran of certain technologies related to unmanned aircraft systems and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is considered read and open to amendment at any point. Without objection, the Keating Amendment in the nature of a substitute, number 65, circulated to members in advance, shall be considered as read and will be treated as original text for purposes of amendment. Is there any discussion of the bill?
Chairman.
I recognize Mr. Keating for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank Chairman McCall and Ranking Member Meeks for holding the markup today. 12 days ago, the world witnessed the horror unleashed by Hamas against the state and the people of Israel, almost 50 years to the day after Yom Kippur War. Israel now finds itself threatened and under attack, this time by terrorists whose very charter is an anti-Semitic attack against the Jewish people. I want to be clear. The United States stands behind Israel in the face of these barbaric attacks and condemns Hamas in the harshest possible terms, which we know in no way furthers the cause or represents the Palestinians' right of self-determination. In fact, it sets it back. I also want to acknowledge that the attack on October 7th is not a distant tragedy, but rather a deeply personal one for those of us who have been impacted in many ways right here in this room, in our many districts, the people that live there that are touched by this, and many around the world. As President Biden said, there are moments in this life when the pure, unadulterated evil is unleashed in this world. Israelis and the Jewish people suffered one of those moments last week, and it's important we act today in this committee and in the future to ensure Israel has the resources it needs to defend itself. Today, I want to speak briefly in support of H.R. 1809, to block the use of transatlantic technology in Iranian Made Drones Act, which I've offered as an amendment in the nature of a substitute. As we face multiple crises in Israel and in Ukraine, Iran's global malign influence campaign is only growing. For example, we know Iran has been selling unmanned aircraft systems to Russia, which have been used in the illegal war in Ukraine. The White House even released findings that Iran is providing Russia with materials to build a drone manufacturing plant east of Moscow. At the same time, reports have indicated that Hamas, in its devastating attack against Israel, used drones to disable Israeli communications and surveillance capabilities. We also know that Iran has supported Hamas for decades. To target Iran's drones program, H.R. 1809 requires the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, and all of government approach to each draft strategies and report to Congress on actions they've taken to prevent the export of U.S. and European technology to Iran that may be used in drones to attack our allies in Ukraine and Israel. In particular, this bill ensures the subcomponents that are key to the functioning of unmanned aircraft systems like microcontrollers, GPS modules, and microprocessors are not used in any way in any aspect of design, developmental, production, or operational, so that they cannot be employed in unmanned aircraft systems. The legislation also includes provisions to ensure the Secretary of State is working with allies and partners to synchronize our support on an export control that's necessary to close the loopholes related to the illegal export of U.S. and European technology for use in Iranian drones. I want to thank Chairman Joe Wilson, Ranking Member Dean Phillips, and Representative Claudia Tenney for being original co-sponsors of this legislation, and other bipartisan members who have also co-sponsored this bill. I also want to thank committee leadership for coming together on a bipartisan agreement on this text. Finally, I want to commend the Biden administration, who's working tirelessly on this issue and who have kept Congress informed of their efforts. Just yesterday, restrictions in the UN Security Council in Resolution 2231 constrained Iran's ballistic missile program, which had expired. In response, the Biden administration imposed a series of additional sanctions, and Secretary Blinken released a statement with 46 other countries recognizing the continued threat posed by the proliferation of missile-related materials, goods, and technology, including those related to unmanned aerial vehicles, and the threat that that Iran poses on this. The U.S. and many allies and partners are united in recognition of the threat posed by the Iranian regime, and our multilateral efforts at the State Department are complemented by the passage of this legislation here today in this committee. I firmly believe this legislation furthers U.S. policy towards our allies in Ukraine and Israel, improves our export controls, and punishes Iran for its malign influence campaigns. I strongly urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? The ranking member from New York, Mr. Meeks, is recognized for 5 minutes.
I really appreciate Representative Keating for bringing this bill aiming to counter Iran's procurement and production of armed drones. Over the course of several years, Iran has produced advanced microelectronics, guidance systems, and other technologies necessary to domestically produced drones. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Iran exported significant quantities of these drones to the Russian military. Iranian origin drones have been used to bombard Ukrainian infrastructure, including residential neighborhoods, hospitals, schools, and daycares. These attacks mirror similar ones conducted by Hamas terrorists, which we understand are conducted by the drones Hamas procured from or manufactured with the assistance of Iran. These drones are instrumental to Hamas's onslaught on southern Israel, which resulted in the murder of scores of Israeli civilians earlier this month. In recent months, we've been made aware of the analysis by our own intelligence community, as well as outside experts and investigators, that found recovered Iranian drones to contain components originating from the United States and European companies. Many Iranian entities are already sanctioned for acquisition of components for and production of drones, as well as their intermediaries, but given the dual use and off-the-shelf availability and commercial nature of some items, regulation and interdiction is difficult. This bill requires strategies from the State and Commerce Departments on how they intend to prevent such proliferation from continuing. It also requires the Department of State to develop a related strategy to address proliferation of dual-use technology, working within foreign governments to prevent the export and proliferation to Iran. So again, I thank Mr. Keating and all of the co-sponsors, but Mr. Keating in particular for his leadership on this bill, and I urge all members to support it. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The ranking member yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? The gentleman from Minnesota is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to thank Mr. Keating for introducing this important measure, along with Mr. Wilson, Ms. Tenney, and me. I'm also proud to co-lead this critical piece of legislation that seeks to prevent the use of American technology in Iranian drones. From its support of Russia's brutal war in Ukraine to proxy militia attacks on U.S. personnel in Syria and Iraq, Iran's development and deployment of drones is a threat to the United States and to our partners. The fact that U.S. materials are being used in Iranian drones that attack American and partner forces and kill Ukrainian civilians is completely unacceptable. And I'm pleased that the Biden administration is undergoing an important review of current policies and practices to ensure that American technology does not find its way into the hands of our adversaries. And I look forward to engaging with them further in its efforts to prevent the proliferation of Iranian drones. I also want to acknowledge that in July of this year, this committee marked up the bipartisan Fight Crime Act, which imposes sanctions on those involved in the supply, sale, transfer, or support of Iran's missile and drone program. Unfortunately, UN restrictions to constrain Iran's ballistic missile program expired just yesterday. During this time of tragedy and uncertainty, the U.S. and our partners must continue to counter Iran's destabilizing missile and drone activity, including by enforcing existing sanctions and passing the Fight Crime Act. Congress must act soon. And that also means we need to elect a speaker so that we can use all the tools at our disposal to prevent the proliferation of Iranian missiles and drones to protect Americans both at home and abroad. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Do any other members seek recognition on this matter?